Okay, so you put on 5 pounds, but you lose a couple inches. It's just not worth it. You got your whole life to, put on muscle, but you only have a certain period.
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about Dan Bilzerian's stance on teenagers taking anabolic steroids. So he is self-admittedly somebody who started at a very, very young age. He was in his 20s. He wasn't a teenager, but he basically got into it in Mexico, injecting. He actually started with a ReadyJect Deca shot using an 18 gauge needle. Fucking wild story. But basically he was in SEAL training, and a lot of the other guys were doing it too. Taking anabolics to improve stress resilience, muscle growth, etc., recovery, obviously something that would be highly advantageous in the environments, imposed on them during that kind of intensive training schedule. And he basically just kept using shit, but ultimately his use was relatively responsible. His biggest cycle ever was I think it was 600 milligrams per week of test and EQ in totality, plus 20 milligrams of D-ball per day. So he was at 740 milligrams a week of total anabolic exposure, plus a few IUs of GH. Pretty benign considering he is seen as a relatively reckless individual and has done some pretty crazy shit with rec drugs, including the ridiculous exposure to a high Viagra dosage, which ultimately led to heart attacks at a very young age. So perhaps this is what was the, catalyst for being conservative with his anabolic exposure. But either way, he's been using testosterone for, 15 years or something, or, at over a decade, certainly for sure, because he started back in SEAL training. And they talk about here his stance on, in this podcast, the Michael Sartain podcast, they talk about his, I might have mispronounced that, but apologies if I did. They talk about his stance on teens taking anabolics, if it's a bad idea, a good idea or not. And in the book, he talks about, and by the way, this is about his, he's kind of going on a big tour, I guess, promoting his book that he just put out called The Setup. And basically the context is of his, foray into anabolics is he saw his cousin gain 20 pounds of muscle one summer on a heavy cycle of Dianabol. So obviously it wasn't actually all muscle, but if you see a guy grow lean, even if he's, hyperinflated with water, if he doesn't appear to have gained a lot of body fat, you're probably going to think it's all muscle. Obviously not the fucking case, but still, having substantial progress from D-ball, you might get a bit jealous when you're cranking away in the fucking gym and barely making progress, and then your cousin gains, 40 to 50 pounds on his bench in a matter of 6 to 8 weeks using D-ball. It might get kind of annoying, I can imagine. So, obviously that was something that stuck out in his mind. And when he went into SEALs training, he ended up getting jabbed with some Deca because that was what he had access to in Tijuana, apparently. And then he has his kind of, foray into the world of anabolics. And he has a big disclaimer about, teenage use, which we're going to get into now.
In the book, you actually show the heaviest stack that you ever did. Yep. What was your opinions about taking roids then, and then how do you feel about them now?
Well, and I said this in the book, I think that kids absolutely should not do steroids until they're finished growing, because it's just not worth it. You're going to fuse your epiphyseal plates, and it's okay, so you put on 5 pounds, but you lose a couple inches. It's just not worth it. You got your whole life to, put on muscle, but you only have a certain period to grow. So
I was pretty impressed with that answer. I was not really expecting him to go tangent into the interaction with estrogen receptors on prematurely closing growth plates. This is something that is an actual concern. Does it actually manifest itself in practical application where individuals use, a heavy D-ball cycle or whatever, and they end up, getting shorter than they otherwise would have? It's hard to say for certain because it's not like we have a fucking control group to compare against the same guy using a D-ball test cycle versus a guy not doing anything. The same individual, we can't rewind time and not have them take gear or some shit. So it's difficult to say, but we do see in the literature suggestions of even SERM deployment or certain anabolics in the context of muscle wasting and whatnot that we can see directly the effect some of this stuff has on growth plates and the interaction with estrogen receptors, as well as negative feedback as a result of overly agonizing these receptors and causing your body to shut down natural production as a result of realizing there's more than enough stimulation. So you can imagine Like your body doesn't know like fake shit from real shit necessarily. So if you have something that otherwise wouldn't have been adequately stimulated to close those growth plates, but you're manually administering it exogenously through synthetic means, like does your body know there's a synthetic version of some hormone there? No, it just has like a physiologic function that is carried out or some reaction that occurs as a result of the exposure. So if you're exposing yourself early to an amount that would otherwise have, years down the line been the thing that, close your growth plates, is that something that might cause it to happen earlier? I don't necessarily think you're going to become massively shorter as a result of anabolics exposure early. However, I do think there is definitely a cause for concern. And I'm on the same page with him that I think the risk and the ROI on it is not there, given the fact that the likelihood is also extremely high that if you're a teenager, your brain has not even reached full maturation. The likelihood that you have even understood this stuff to the degree you need to before using it is very, very unlikely, to the point where it would be a horrible idea, in my opinion, to use anabolics to begin with when you don't even understand how to diet or train or how these hormones interact with your body to begin with, because ultimately your organs only can sustain so much drug burden before you end up with major issues that otherwise force you to stop using super physiological amounts of hormones. So does it make sense to be using them when you're in your peak natural production years? You could potentially hinder, the infrastructure that you are basing your physique off of, like, skeletal growth and whatnot, as well as having permanent changes in a psychological aspect potentially through the psychoactive effects of these drugs, permanently changing your, emotional stability, your ability to tolerate stress. Like, who fucking knows, dude? Like, I would not be fucking around with shit in teenage years personally. I would be taking that time, even if you know you're going to do it, to be thoroughly educating yourself and dialing the shit out of your training and your nutrition and your recovery. But I'll let him continue.
Definitely not worth it until you're done growing. But then after that, it's just kind of a function of where you naturally, like, go get tested and then see where your baseline is and then make an informed decision.
So what happens if I go to a doctor and my test is at like 2000? Is the doctor going to be like, are you taking anabolics? Like, how does that work?
So they basically start talking about TRT and tangenting into that discussion at that point. But basically he is, taking a pretty responsible approach to it. And he's saying, he's sort of implying too, don't even take shit unless you have low levels to begin with, which is probably the most responsible answer he could have given, which was even surprising above and beyond the epiphyseal plate closure stuff. So what do I think in general? Like, I echo his thoughts on the matter. And I think individuals should be waiting until they have at least reached adulthood and full, like, skeletal maturation. Like, who knows, dude? If you shut down your hormone production too, and you're using, for example, SARMs as a teenager or something too, something that's seen as like more benign potentially, when in reality it's not necessarily the case. If you're shutting down androgen production or using synthetic anabolic agents that don't convert to DHT and whatnot, like bioidentical testosterone, like, this is a critical period, not only for psychological development, skeletal development, the actual infrastructure of your fucking bones and everything, but above and beyond that too, dick growth. This is something that I think goes overlooked by teens who use SARMs. Like, you have no idea, like, what kind of age bracket and what kind of exposure to DHT you need to maximally grow what you have been given. And shutting down your HPTA and cycling up and down and constantly flowing in and out of cycles, or even getting on a, whatever it is that you're doing, you're ultimately limiting your exposure to bioidentical androgens that are otherwise pushing you through sexual differentiation and maturation in your teenage years. So, like, I would not be fucking with that personally. And I would definitely advise learning this shit thoroughly, but being patient and waiting until you're a full-grown adult if you're going to be exposing yourself to this stuff. So anyways, that is my thoughts, and that is Dan's thoughts, and I thought it was worth touching on. It was an interesting insight into his knowledge about endocrinology and his stance on relatively responsible anabolic use. So anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. All the comments help the algorithm. They're much appreciated. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com, follow my Instagram, at More Plates, More Dates, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic, all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home. Get high quality medical oversight from doctors who actually understand endocrinology and how to interpret biomarkers and what kind of diagnostics you should be getting, and how to create an individualized protocol just for you based on your own individual needs rather than a cookie cutter script of TRT, HCG, and anastrozole like most clinics will do. As well as if you're a bodybuilder or a natural, like whatever it is, we are non-judgmental and we are turnkey in that we handle an array of different situations when it comes to optimization and maximizing quality of life and or ensuring your health is monitored in the most accurate way to kind of reflect what you should be doing, changes wise in your lifestyle, dietary manipulations, potentially pharmacology, supplements, etc. We have high quality doctors who reflect the same quality of information I try to put out on my channel. So definitely check that out. Having a high quality doctor in your camp, who even just knowing what kind of diagnostics you should be getting and having somebody who's educated enough to interpret those for you, fucking critical in my opinion. And I wish I had access to something like this when I was younger. So you can check that out, as well as Gorilla Mind, nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mode, pre-workout formulas. I designed myself from scratch, my recommended diet model for gaining muscle and sports performance, as well as anything else I'm associated with. It is on the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.